theoretical physics. I think there are lots of things that sort of disprove it, and the fact that religion itself is so intricate, and there is no basis of evidence, and people can actually believe in that. It's just kind of strange. I mean, you might as well believe in a magical flying unicorn who's the high power, and it basically has the same
That's
backing and evidence.
fine.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, that's
still
fine. I
retarded.
just don't know what that has to do with you knowing that there's no higher power.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that, I quite like physics. I think
What
those
does
are
that have to do with anything?
no. But let me finish, okay? I'm just saying that at a perspective of science and theoretical physics, it's possible for a god or a higher power to actually exist in the universe.
If you're choosing to come to the conclusion of that argument by the basis that science can't discover or can't provide a basis. You're choosing to use a system that necessarily precludes the basis for any such being to exist. The scientific method in science itself is used for testing things that are grounded in what we know to be physical reality, and the claim is that there is a higher power that transcends that. So necessarily, I don't know why you would think the scientific method would be able to be used in such an endeavor.
Category error.
Like I'm saying, it's not necessarily that science can't provide the basis for religion. I'm saying that it's
no. I'm telling you it is. I'm telling you it is. I'm telling you, science. Should there be a higher power? By definition, science wouldn't be able to ascertain such a truth because of how. Well, the scientific method is used to test things that are bound by things like space and time, right? Things that adhere to the laws of the universe. And the claim about a higher power is that it necessarily transcends those things that we know to be true about the reality we live in.
Not silly.
Is it silly?
Yeah.
So okay, well, let's
I said
test
necessarily.
that.
I said not necessarily. I mean, let me explain. Okay.
Yeah, Declan,
All
you
right,
didn't say that's silly.
mechanics,
He said not
We want to
necessarily.
walk up.
In quantum mechanics, there is a theory called you find a superposition. Okay.
Yeah, I know what superposition is.
Yeah,
Yes.
superposition. Okay, so the state of a particle being of both positions.
Mutually exclusive states. Yes, I know what superposition.
Yeah, simultaneous. Yeah. Okay, so have you seen the branch of it, which is the many worlds interpretation, in which universes are created through these
parallel universes?
Yeah, through these completely randomized.
Yes.
Because once a particle is finally snaps out of its superposition by contact with another particle or another force, it therefore has to choose a certain state, and that state is bound by random chance.
Yeah. What does this have to do with the topic?
Okay, now let me explain, because it's not that big.
Filibuster.
So basically, what it means is that there is a possibility that there would be universes created after this superposition being destroyed, essentially.
What does this have to do with anything?
Because obviously there are many states which are bound by random chance, then obviously there'll be many universes, and therefore universes will branch out of universes at an infinite rate.
What does this have to do with anything?
That means that universes are created through the superposition of particles, and thus there is no beginning of the cycle in which universes are created.
That doesn't follow, number one.
Which means
that doesn't follow. That's a complete non sequitur, number one. And number two, people who believe in a higher power, even if they're creationists, don't contend that there are not these lower order chain of causal events that would lead to things such as a universe existing. Like the Christian, for example, is just going to say something like, yeah, we affirm that. We absolutely believe that Yahweh created those building blocks and uses them to create.
So that's where you haven't actually listened to my argument. What I'm arguing is that since this is happening at an infinite rate, because this not only it basically means every universe is created through the destroying of a superposition, and thus that means that for all time, universes have been created through these fractures of space-time.
No, it doesn't.
Therefore,
that just doesn't follow.
Therefore, there does not need to be a beginning.
That wasn't your argument.
Cycle. Yes, it was. Yes,
no,
it was.
Your argument was that there is no higher power, not that there didn't need to be.
No, I'm just saying that there isn't a higher power. I'm saying that the basis, which one of the arguments which people often talk about is, oh, well, how did the universe begin? How can the Big Bang exist?
Did I say that?
Started off? No, I'm just saying.
Okay,
then
I'm not interested in
you
that.
You asked for my stances on whether there is a higher power.
No, I asked you to substantiate your claim.
Well, you asked me my stances on whether there is a higher power or not. I'm telling you my stances.
All you've given me so far are non sequiturs. Non sequiturs number 1 and number 2. I told you, look, I told, like a Christian, for example, would totally say something like, yeah, we affirm that these processes might go on.
But then why does the Christian always talk about how the Big Bang must have been created?
Not all Christians talk about that.
Fucking Pope has
most of them do because
no.
Why does he keep bringing up
A lot
nonsense?
of the look, this is all just a red herring, right? Number 1, not all Christians believe in the Big Bang. Some Christians don't even believe in the Big Bang. There are some Christians, minority, that would say the Big Bang happened, but Yahweh was the cause of it. This is all fucking irrelevant. I don't see what any of the bullshit you spouted, such as superpositions, has anything to do with whether there's a higher power or not.
Because you clearly don't understand what I'm saying. Did you even listen to what I said?
There's no observation that's inconsistent with a higher power existing.
Well,
it's just not.
Okay, go on. Okay, summarize what I said, okay?
Yeah, so basically you're mentioning superpositions. What you're saying is that a universe can be created or is created for an infinite amount of time out of these superpositions that happen. And because of that, because it's infinite, it's likely, and this is where the non sequitur on your part comes in, it's likely that for an infinite amount of time, these universes sprout out an infinite number of them, thus you don't need a higher power. And I'm telling you, that's a non sequitur.
Okay, right. So, yeah, you might as well, you might interpret it as the idea that you don't need a higher power. But and that is partially my argument that you don't need a higher power. But what I'm trying to say is that this whole I'm trying to go against the notion of how a high power would have started a cycle of the creation of universes. And you asked for my stances, and I'm giving you my stance. And by addressing my stances, I'm performing
because your first claim was that there is no higher power.
You interrupted.
Wasn't that it's not needed?
You interrupted. Okay, by asking for my stances, I performed that by a process of elimination of or by rebuttaling certain.
No, you didn't eliminate anything.
Yeah. Actually, because I'm rebutting something, which is.
How did you eliminate the higher power by saying that it's not needed?
No. You're not understanding what I'm saying. A process of elimination on the basis of several ideas that people tend to bring about. Process of elimination.
Something that I didn't bring about?
Can you start? No. You asked for my stances, and by addressing those stances,
I asked you to substantiate your proposition.
You aren't listening. Okay, you clearly don't listen.
I just spouted out what your position was. What do you mean I'm not listening?
No, you're not listening.
You made this claim once before. And you said, "Can you give me my position back?" I gave your position back to you, and then further, I pointed out that your proposition has now changed. Your original proposition is there is no higher power. I asked you to substantiate that. And then the conclusion that you would believe that we're led to is ultimately that a higher power is not needed.
The point is which dilemma brings about the idea that there must be a higher power. And
I didn't say there must be. I did not say there must be.
Well, if you believe in a higher power, then you
I don't believe in a higher power.
Okay.
I don't believe in a higher power. I'm asking you to substantiate your original proposition.
You know what the word agnostic means, dude?
Yes, I know. It means you're not sure.
No, it means that you don't know.
Knowledge. Not sure means not know. Okay.
No, not really.
Yes, it does.
You can believe in it and be sure that you believe in it.
There's no empirical evidence against a higher power.
Well, I mean, there kind of is.
God has
I know there kind of is.
Well, look. Look, okay. To be honest, I haven't actually been in a debate of atheism in a long time, and to be honest, I need to try to discover my physics book again, so I can, because I have been thinking of trying to get into it again. But yeah.
What's a physics book going to do?
Oh my gosh! Come on, okay, right? Okay, well, let me get it first. Let me get it first, okay? Let me get it first and get into it first, okay? And then I'll tell you. All right?
He's already told you you're trying to substantiate metaphysics with physics.
Metaphysics.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're trying to substantiate the existence of transcendent being, by transcendent we just mean its existence is not grounded in any sort of space or time or any of the laws of the universe. And then you use the system by which you discover things that are grounded.
It's quite retarded to think that just is not bound by space or time. Therefore, you can assume anything you.
I mean, you're not.
want.
It's just you're necessarily precluding the chance to come to any conclusion about a transcendent being. The tools don't fit the job.
Look, do you think if what you were saying wasn't the case, that would be evidence against God? I mean, for
Sorry?
God? Do you
Sorry?
think if what you were saying wasn't the case, that would be evidence that a God existed?
Well, I mean, it really depends, because obviously we don't know a lot about the universe. We've only scraped the surface of the universe. Okay,
Answer the
so there would be
question.
well, yeah, I am answering the question. Okay, it's not simple as yes or no. When you talk about these kind of topics, it won't be as simple as yes or no. So, pardon me. Let me explain. Okay, all right. So, a lot of science, or most of science actually, hasn't been discovered by human beings and our research. Okay, so even if this was the case, we wouldn't be so sure to whether we can still answer that or not, because there's a lot more to discover that could disprove or prove that.
Do you think if science had no hypothesis about how the universe
Well,
began,
yeah, if we discovered 100% of science, then
Sir?
obviously we would
Sir?
realize that there must
Sir?
be Yeah, I am.
Sir?
Okay.
Do you think if science had no hypothesis about how
Yeah,
the
yeah.
universe
You've already asked
began,
this. You've already asked this. I'm answering it right now. I'm
that
saying
wouldn't
that.
be well? Look, I'll just make the claim then. That wouldn't be evidence that a God existed.
Sorry.
If science had no hypothesis about why the universe began, science was just completely clueless, that wouldn't be evidence that a God existed.
No, it wouldn't, because there'd be still more to actually
So it
understand.
wouldn't be evidence that a God existed, but it's evidence against a God existing, the fact that you do have it. It can't be evidence for it, but the negation is evidence against it.
There's a difference.
You're an idiot!
No, there's a difference between not discovering and already knowing, because one of which is quite shrouded, and there are to be honest, if you don't know something, there's a difference between not knowing and completely disproving or finding evidence against something. Okay.
So his position is, look, it can't be evidence for it, but the negation is evidence against it. He's a moron.
No. Okay, right. So I'll give you the.
That does sound pretty moronic. Dude.
Okay, I'll give you the example. Okay, so if you were okay, so I can hear my voice. It's kind of distracting me. I'm gonna mute There we go. It's much better. All right. So, if you were to discover something, okay, and before you call me moron, which, by the way, it is quite rude, especially in a debate, and it shows that you have no morality in a debate. Okay. So, if you were to discover something, there's a difference between discovering something and not knowing. If you don't know that some scientific field, if you don't know a scientific field, then obviously, there's a you won't just make an assumption. Oh, therefore something exists or something like that, okay? Because there's a difference between not knowing and finding evidence against a certain scientific field, therefore proving something else. And that's where you're wrong.
That was complete nonsense.
Ben, you're echoing.
It's not complete nonsense.
Who, me?
Okay, is there any observation that can be evidence for God?
Observation? No, I don't think so.
But there can be observations that are evidence against God? You're an idiot!
Yeah, oh my gosh.
What a moron. Get this guy out of here!
No, just because I think that there's there's more evidence against God than for God doesn't mean I'm an idiot, okay? I just think that there isn't evidence for God, because that can be disputed by the evidence against God. And before you call anybody an idiot and mute yourself because you have nothing else to say but questions, raise a point. and then we can use the idiot now.
Yeah, when you actually justify your proposition that you first made about there not being a God, we'll stop talking to you. But in the meantime, Joseph, tell me what are the necessary preconditions for the intelligibility of the
Joseph,
universe?
I told you.
Okay, one question at a time, please. All right, repeat your question again. Sorry.
What are the necessary preconditions for the intelligibility of the universe?
Preconditions. So it's the preconditions for the integrity of the universe, the existence of it. Is that what you're talking about?
So his position is that God can be falsified, but there can never be evidence for God.
Mm-hmm.
What a stupid, retarded, moronic fool.
Yeah, okay. Let me check. Have you muted yourself? Hang on.
Why, do you want me to say something else?
I'm just saying before you just call people morons and then mute
How
yourself
would you
because you're too
how would
scared
you
to actually raise
falsify
your
it?
own point. Could you actually try to explain the logic of what you're saying, and could you actually listen to what I say myself? Because what you're basically saying is, look, there are ways that you can have evidence against something and no evidence for it, because that evidence for it can be disputed. All right. Now, before you actually continuously ask that thing, all right, and force me to have to repeat myself because you're not listening, let me answer the question which was asked by the separate person, okay? Because you've had many turns. Let's be honest. All right. Could you please? So you were talking about the intelligibility or the prerequisites for the intelligibility of the universe, right?
That's a separate question. That's not a scientific question.
Yes. But thing is, to be
How are
honest,
you gonna
you've had your
falsify
go,
God?
and you've just chosen not to listen to what I'm saying, because I definitely know you have nothing against what I'm saying. You're not raising a point to dispute or a counter argument. You're just asking the same thing. You're straight up ignoring me. So I'm going to move on to somebody else. Thank you. All right. So could you please?
Wait, what did he just say?
There we go.
You just
don't
just
listen.
doesn't have an answer. How are you gonna falsify it?
Okay, so who was the person who asked about the prerequisites for the intelligibility of the universe?
All.
Okay.
No, I think you should answer godless before you move on.
Yeah, I mean, any of us can take these arguments forward with you, pretty much. Standard Christian apologetics.
Okay.
What was Godless's claim? Was that like on the back of Declan trying to get him to justify?
Yeah, Godless's claim was apparently you cannot have evidence against something without evidence for something. That's basically the point.
Right. You're saying, right, you said earlier that the evidence against outweighs the evidence for, but you believe that there can't be evidence for. So of course you would believe that the evidence against outweighs the evidence for.
It depends. It depends how you sort of describe evidence for. If evidence for is evidence which cannot be disputed against because it is factually solidified, then of course there is none. Okay, in my opinion. All right. So if you call anything evidence, whether it can be disputed or not, whether it is in fact unfactual, or whether it is or whether it's pleasable evidence, then sure,
plausible?
there is quote unquote plausible. Then of course you could say that there is evidence for, but it depends on your stances. I personally think that evidence has to be solidified in order to suggest that it is in fact evidence.
Well, do you think that the historical consensus around the existence of Jesus is solidified evidence?
Well, I mean, I haven't really been. Some people, they talk about how there is evidence, archaeological evidence, that Jesus did exist as a being. Whether Jesus was the Son of God is a different question. But I'm not sure of the evidence itself. I haven't actually touched upon the subject. Sorry.
Do you think
could you refer to me the actual?
Yeah. Do you think if Jesus existed as a historical figure and the Bible writes about him existing, that counts as evidence for the Bible being true?
No, because there's a difference between a figure existing and a figure actually being the Son of God.
Well,
because for all he could be a crazy old man.
If the model, if the model has Jesus existing and Jesus exists, that is evidence of the model, because if he didn't exist, then it would be inconsistent with the model. So if it had some claim about someone existing that nobody can verify existed.
It's evidence of the mold, but it's not evidence of the actual basis of Christianity itself, whether Christianity is true.
Well, Jesus being the Son of God is the basis for Christianity being true. Jesus existing is
the
part
evidence,
of that.
the evidence
And
might
if you
suggest
agree
that
with
Jesus did
me-
exist, but whether he was the Son of God is a different question, and that has not been
Well,
proven by this archaeological evidence.
how would you prove archaeologically? Well, that's just an incoherent statement because you wouldn't have archaeological evidence to prove that Jesus is the Son of God. So it looks like there's a disagreement there, but I feel like it's irrelevant, but the agreement is relevant
Well,
to
look,
the
I'm
model.
not 100% sure to the scenario where people claim that Jesus was an existing historical figure, but I have heard that it has derived from this idea that there have been archaeological discoveries that basically sort of prove the identity of Jesus as being an individual on the planet. Whether he be the Son of God is a different question again. But yeah.
There's writings. About
There's no such archaeological evidence. You wouldn't be able to find it. It shouldn't exist, and doesn't. So
the Shroud
Okay.
of Turin was a forgery. Shroud of Turin was somebody who created it
don't
with
tell people that. You'll get Catholics upset.
I mean,
It was a
Explain.
century fake.
well,
I mean, it's still held as a relic,
Down Man
so-
was a hoax, or whatever that
Well, I mean, if somebody's willing to fake something 1,500 years later, it's some evidence for something, I guess.
Well, the faking isn't evidence for anything other than the beliefs of the people who faked it, but the other evidence, like the writings, is definitely strong evidence for the existence of Jesus.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you
Yeah, this is actually the first time that I've actually engaged myself in an argument of atheism in about a year, actually. So,
You did horrible, by the way.
Is this guy a
Alright.
Christian or what? I just came in, so.
No. He's asserting that he has like knowledge of the existence of a god, of a supernatural being.
well,
which is
I'm just,
impossible.
I'm not saying that I have knowledge. I'm just saying.
Why are you saying that?
You claim that you said
I-
that you know he doesn't exist, and that was
I'm
where
just,
the whole thing
I'm
stemmed
saying,
from.
I'm saying, in my opinion, I do think that, well, I did say I know, but obviously, I'm not an all-knowing being, so obviously, don't take
Well,
that
then you don't
100%
say the
seriously.
word "I know" then, because that's what agnosticism means. It means
Okay,
you don't
what-
know.
What do you?
This
What is
whole
your?
thing
What is the
stems
statement
from
that you're
that.
saying, Joseph?
I know. I'm just saying, but you're thinking that I said that I know, and therefore I am intending
I don't give a
to
fuck.
say
What's
that
the position that you're defending in here?
atheism.
He claims there's no God.
Yeah, I
Okay.
claim that. Okay, I myself know that. You may quote unquote know differently. It doesn't
why are
mean
you-
that I'm claiming
why
to
are
be
you
an
saying
That's not
you
how
all-knowing
the
know
being.
word
that?
"know" works.
Well, atheists
down.
often say, "Oh, I'm unsure about that," because then that means that they're agnostics.
No, agnostic is a whatever. It's a fucking term that comes before it. You're an agnostic atheist or an agnostic theist.
That's not necessarily the case either, but like agnostic in terms of belief is usually in between atheism and theism. Like you're not willing to make a claim. You can make a claim without having
That's not the
knowledge.
definition of the word.
right, like you
I don't
don't
give a
believe.
fuck what you're having to say,
I've got
dude.
one question
Like,
for
If
you.
you
I've
want to
got-
be ignorant somewhere else, you can go do that. But
I've got
what
a
I'm
question.
talking about
not
is
talking
the
about
philosophical
fucking
definitions.
definition of a word,
Yeah.
dude.
I don't
I've
give
got
a fuck, dude. You can fuck off. But
I'm sorry
Joseph,
that you
what
don't want to read the
what we're
dictionary.
talking about is the correct philosophical definitions rather than
Incorrect
this
term.
made up
I've got a
bullshit
question
that this
for you.
guy's running around with. But
If somebody
Can't handle
believes,
that fucking point, dude.
excuse me,
I don't know
Somebody
what the
making a
fuck you're
point.
talking about, dude.
excuse me.
Agnostic is not in between.
Listen to this guy
non-theism and
yell.
atheism.
It is.
Agnostic is
Yes, it is.
is a claim of knowledge.
Let me.
Excuse me. Let me
It's,
actually speak, please. Okay.
Agnostic
So-
is saying
it's used-
I know
it's-
a God exists. I know a God doesn't exist.
I've seen people use it the way
Believing
that
in a
you're
God.
talking about, but the majority of
Yeah,
philosophical
okay.
literature, at least
Majority of
lately, is
people
using it a
don't.
different
So
way
one
than what you're
person,
talking about.
okay, can somebody
Argument
raise a
to fucking
point and then
popularity, then.
the point goes to the
I'd rather
opposite?
not have the argument with this guy on something that's been pretty much settled. But if you want to talk, Joseph, what's the position that you're holding?
Okay, right. So, I'm defending atheism, but what I was also going to say is that I'm also going to say that, okay, here's a question for you. So, if you believe something, what is the point in believing something if you don't know yourself that it exists? Why would you put the effort to try to perform these religious practices? And in general, why would you, quote unquote,
Well,
believe something to not think yourself that it exists? To not, quote unquote know it exists.
The religious
This
people
isn't
do
supporting
quote
the
unquote
claim, is it?
know that it exists.
Sorry, repeat yourself, because somebody was in the background.
The religious practitioners do quote unquote know that it exists.
Exactly. So why
Okay,
can't
so
I
what's
say
the
myself
objection?
that I quote unquote know that God doesn't
There's some
exist?
religious people that'll say they know it exists, but
Well,
they're
because
usually coming at it from a justification perspective.
right, well, because you don't know, and what you're doing is you're refusing to be you're refusing to acknowledge the intellectual honesty that you're engaging in earlier.
Sorry, what intellectual honesty? Could you sort of define it, please? As in,
Right. Well, you could say that you know that God doesn't exist, but that's when you're asked for the justification of how you know, you get into an evidentialist approach, and the evidentialist approach doesn't claim knowledge of certain things. So,
well, like I said, I haven't had this debate in a year, and I'm thinking of trying to pick up a book again and try to go through the
Okay.
justifications, which solidified my factual justifications.
Yeah,
What I wrote, which stuck with me, because I actually read about this not too long ago, was the idea that of the many worlds interpretation. That's basically one of the only things that I can offer thus far. So.
well, that's yeah, I understand.
Because
I don't
haven't
mind
actually been
helping
I haven't
you
actually
get
been
back into that.
actually haven't I've been prioritizing history for this year, and I need to try to actually pick that up in physics, because that's also a
Yeah,
passion. I
that's
don't want to
all.
neglect it.
That's all fine and well and good, but I'm telling you that what you're presenting as one of the evidences isn't actually doesn't actually get you to a quote unquote know that God doesn't exist.
What's he presenting as evidence that?
Physics.
Yeah, science and physics. He's like getting into
That isn't
superposition
true.
and universe.
I didn't
creation.
intend to actually include myself into this debate. I tried, but obviously don't ask too much, because like I said, I haven't been into physics for quite a while, and I haven't been into the debate for quite a while, because I haven't done this debate for basically a year now. Okay.
Are you trying to assert that, like,
Ocean,
science would be able to comment on God, like, at all?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I said to him, Ocean. He's been told this over and over, which was
Is God a physical? Oh, hold on. Let me try this for a second. Is God a physical being?
A physical being. I'm saying that God cannot exist because of the limits of physical beings or physical entities.
Right. So are you saying that God is a physical entity?
I'm just saying an entity cannot exist and therefore be intangible. It is impossible for an entity to exist to be intangible.
Right, that's a claim,
All right,
but that's not.
To actually have an effect on other entities or other objects.
All right, that's also a claim. Can we?
Things which aren't tangible can't be entities, and that things which aren't entities or tangible can't affect other things which are tangible?
Just, like, all he's just making another claim.
That's two separate presuppositions in there which you need to defend if you're making that claim. Do you have a defense of those presuppositions?
Sorry?
Do you have a defense of
I guess that's a no.
Axioms?
Look, what I'm... Sorry?
Jesus
You
Christ.
need to repeat your point.
Well,
because you need
yeah,
to...
I'm trying to...
Okay, to be honest, you aren't really being fair here. I did tell you that I haven't been in this debate for quite a while. I need to regather my points before I do this again. This was quite spontaneous. And I didn't really ask for this, okay? You just decided to randomly prop up questions, okay? Like, be fair here, okay? People are
pretty focused on that kind of stuff, but if you want to, like, I'm confused as to how you're trying to say that if the physical entity, or like a entity that is non-physical, is disproven by
he doesn't
science.
have a way of saying that. He's just saying that's
I know that he
doesn't have
not
a substantiation for it, and he doesn't want to talk about it anymore because us asking him to substantiate it, that's where that leads to.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's just confusing to me that he's trying to say that science disproves God somehow.
Well, he's changed his story from when he first started to speak to Declan. What he said to Declan was that he doesn't believe that God exists. In fact, he said there's no God exists. And then he went on to say, because X happens in physics, then God cannot exist. That was
Yeah,
his
that doesn't
whole
mean
argument.
anything.